Good evening to everybody, and I want to thank all parents for making time to be here at this meeting tonight. I also want to thank all of the MCPS staff members who are taking time to join us this evening. I also want to take a moment to recognize and introduce our Associate Superintendent for the Office of Special Education, Dr. Gwendolyn Mason. Dr. Mason.
Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you once again.
So this is a special evening. It's become quite a tradition here in Montgomery County. We're very lucky to have this tradition where we have an opportunity once a year to hear from our superintendent of schools. So this evening we'll be graced with the presence of Dr. Monitha McKnight, who will be making remarks and also responding to some questions. So I'm going to take a few moments to go over the agenda after I have an opportunity to allow our co-chairs to introduce themselves. So Connie and Victoria, if you'd like to introduce yourselves, that would be wonderful.
Sure. Good evening, everybody. My name is Connie Nepomuceno. I have a daughter that is 7 years old, and I have a son that is 9 years old, and he's on the Asperger's program at Diamond Elementary School. I've been attending SEAC meetings since my son started a PEP. So it's been a learning journey for me. I'm here to help anybody who might have some questions regarding special education or who might need assistance. So please don't hesitate to contact us. And I hope everybody have a wonderful holiday season. Thank you.
Thank you, Connie. Victoria.
Hello, everybody, and thank you, everybody, for attending tonight and joining us. My name is Victoria Yellow, and I have a daughter in special education. She's at BE. I want to also thank all MSPS staff for joining and give a special welcome to Dr. McKnight. Thank you for joining us tonight.
So you can see this evening we are going to be hearing from Dr. McKnight. She'll be joining us in a few moments. She's going to speak for roughly 20 minutes. Then we'll take about 20 minutes of questions. Then after that, we'll give the parents an opportunity to jump into their networking session. This is an opportunity for me as the Director of Special Education also to welcome some folks who may not typically join us on these Thursday evenings. For those of you for whom it's your first time, we welcome you. We will also try to reach out to folks to get your email address if you'd like to be a part of the regular email distribution list. We'll find a way to get that information from you so you can get regular updates from us if you're interested. For those of you who are new, there's a lot of information about SEAC on the website. If you want to access the co-chairs, if you just go into the MCPS website and put in SEAC, it'll take you right to that information. It gives you a calendar of our different events, including the different meetings, shares when our next meeting is, which is January 27th. And you can see the other dates. Tonight is not Thursday, but we typically meet on the fourth Thursday of every month. We have to dodge the holidays, and we often need to make sure that we adjust our calendar for the superintendent's calendar so that we can make that work. And that's what we're doing this evening. So for those of you, again, for whom it's your first time, welcome. Another piece that I will just share in terms of the information front is that in the typical meetings, this is also an opportunity for parents to share public comment. So parents will have an opportunity to share some positive experiences they've had, but also some challenges that they may have had that they would like to speak to the community about and allow us an opportunity to hear from. We typically do not take public comment on the night when the superintendent will be speaking to us. So we won't be doing that this evening, but we will have an opportunity at that next meeting in January. So if you have a public comment that you would like to share, please share in advance with one of the co-chairs. Again, that information is on the SEAC webpage. If you need their email address, you can contact them. Let them know that you have an issue that you'd like to raise at the public comment. We typically allow folks a few minutes, roughly 3 minutes or so to speak their comments. We often are unable to respond to those comments or concerns right away. We take an opportunity to look into it, and we ask that you provide information in writing to the co-chair. So if there's a follow-up, we have an opportunity to address that with you. These evening events are places where we often hit topics that are a way for MCPS to share with you, the community, things that are right in front of us, things that we're dealing with in the moment, but also an opportunity for us to do some learning with you as a community, to share some things that are happening over the course of the year, whether that be updates around curriculum interventions, service changes, anything like that, that is a hot topic that we want you to know about. Our office keeps in close contact with the co-chairs, and in many cases, they bring forward to us topics that the community would like to hear about. We have regular conversations with our co-chairs, so we make sure that the items that we're addressing during our SEAC time are meaningful and relevant for you. Okay. So we're going to hear from Dr. McKnight this evening, and then after that, we also have our parent collaboration time.
Sure, thank you. I thought this might be a good time. Montgomery County Recreation is offering, in partnership with Montgomery County Public Schools, a program called Kids Day Out. And those will be full day programming when Montgomery County staff are having professional days. Those will be offered at community recreation centers. Dr. Mason has the latest flyer. I just sent it to her today. And that will be posted on the SEAC website, but you can also see them on the recreation website. So it's an excellent opportunity. We have both inclusion and segregated options up to age 21. I'll put my email in the chat if anybody has questions about that, or if you'd like me to email you the flyer, I'd be happy to do that.
Thank you, Sharon. One thing I can share is that we've been in a conversation in our office about other opportunities beyond SEAC to share information with parents, and that includes the Parent Academy opportunities, which are not specific to our office, but they are workshop opportunities. And so we've been in communication with the office that puts those Parent Academies together to look at some topics that we could put forward for you. And we are also in discussion in our office about revisiting the Parent Summit, which we know would not be an in-person opportunity. Unfortunately, that's been one of the casualties of the pandemic, is the loss of our wonderful Parent Summit that was in person, where we have typically have a keynote speaker, and then it's a conference style summit, which is a great opportunity for folks to pick and choose about topics that they would like to learn more about. So those are some things that we are looking forward to in terms of opportunities for parents. That's some hot topics that would be addressed through the Parent Academy, and then looking at a virtual option for that Parent Summit, which is in the planning stages right now. Okay, Dr. McKnight, I'm looking for your face on the screen. I just want to make sure we have you in here.
There she is.
All right, there she is. Okay.
Thank you for having me. So good to be here.
Thank you for being here and for making time in your busy schedule. So Dr. McKnight is our acting superintendent of schools, and she's had a distinguished career in education thus far, even though we know that she's got a ways to go and that she'll be adding a lot to that distinguished career. Most recently, she was the deputy superintendent under Dr. Smith, and she was the 2015 middle school principal of the year, in addition to her time in Howard County, where she was in the senior leadership there. I'll just share a brief personal introduction of Dr. McKnight that I know is going to take her down memory lane a little bit, but I wanted to share this because it also speaks to her commitment to special education and to this field. I first met Dr. McKnight roughly 12 years ago when she was administrator at Tilden Middle School. Dr. McKnight at that time was leading the leadership efforts of the Department of Special Education at Tilden when Dr. Mason went through the process of selecting Tilden as a site for a professional development school. Dr. Mason asked me at the time, in my position in her office or in the Office of Special Education, to lead that effort with our Office of Organizational Development. And with that office, we helped to create a professional development site at Tilden that focused on expertise in the area of universal design for learning, We train the teachers there on to become experts in co-teaching practices, differentiation practices, curriculum, technology implementation. And so they ended up with this wonderful cohort of teachers at Tilden at that time that were experts in these areas. And when we felt like we had gotten that expertise to a point where it could be shared, we invited many, many, many schools in to visit that program so that they could see them in action. And I will never forget, Dr. McKnight, how gracious you were at that time to us. We had people coming through that building left and right in the media center doing our initial meetings, taking up that space. And you never made us feel like we were imposing. And then you also helped to set a climate there where you never, the teachers never felt like we were imposing. We would troop through those rooms, we would observe those lessons, and you are our fabulous host at that time. So I know how committed you are to special education. We know how committed you are to the field. We also know how much expertise you brought and how much you learned through that process as well. So to me, that was a very personal experience. It was my first introduction to Dr. McKnight, and it was a very pleasant one. And so when she became deputy superintendent and then acting superintendent of schools for Montgomery County, I was so pleased because I knew that we had a fabulous partner in the Office of Special Education in Dr. McKnight. So with that said, Dr. McKnight, I'm going to turn it over to you. We've gone through the agenda and folks understand you're going to share some remarks.
Bill, thank you so much for that introduction. And that was actually a very nice walk down memory lane. First, let me just say good evening to everyone, and thank you so much for the opportunity to join you this evening. I especially appreciate your time recognizing that this week starts winter break in less than 48 hours. And if you're anything like me, you have a long list of things to do that you're just not going to have enough time to do over the next few days. So taking some time out tonight to really talk about how we're going to continue to work together to support our students is really important. And I want to thank you for that, and especially so much this week. Phil just took me down memory lane. And I got to say, it's one of the proud moments of our work in Montgomery County that we did together at Tilden. And it was so nice, actually, when I came back to the county as deputy superintendent. I had so many staff members actually from Tilden still reach out, actually to this day, to just talk about the amazing work that we did in addressing how we would serve students receiving special education services. And actually for us to serve as a model school at that time and having other school staff come in to learn from us at that point was a proud moment. And so it is about inspiring people to do the right work and understanding what all of the needs are for children to serve them well. That I think always has to be the impetus of what encourages us to continue to push through and figure out how we solve problems, and doing that in shoulder to shoulder work with our community members and our parents, most importantly, is important. So thank you for that reminder, because that was really an awesome opportunity. So as Phil shared, I've had the privilege to work in Montgomery County Public Schools for the past 20 years. Serving students with disabilities has been a critical component of each of my roles, from when I started as a teacher at Parkland Middle School, and then serving as a staff development teacher, providing professional development for teachers on how to best meet the needs of students with disabilities. To moving to when I served as an administrator, as Phil just described, and then later as central office administrator, now as the interim superintendent. And it doesn't matter what role it is that I've served in or that we all serve in. Again, as long as we continue to focus on our students and knowing what's best for them and providing for them is our key motivator for what we do, that has to be the central part of our work. And speaking of the central parts of our work, I do believe that parent partnership is critically important. And I just want to say we're also very grateful for your service on this advisory committee. There is nothing more important than a parent's concern about what happens with their children when they send them off to school every day, and thinking about how they want them to have a wonderful experience, whether it is learning, whether it is related to them learning new skills, and most importantly, making sure that the adults that are serving our students know them so that they can serve them well. And so all of the input that you all have provided through this advisory committee does continue to help us do that. As I think about where we are and who we are at MCPS, we serve over 20,000 students, 20,500 plus students with disabilities, which represents about 12% of our overall student population. I also want to thank Dr. Gwen Mason, our acting associate superintendent in the Office of Teaching, Learning and Schools in the Office of Special Education. She and Mr. Phil Lynch, who is also working as a director in the Department of Special Education Services, they constantly and consistently work to ensure that effective leadership, technical assistance, and monitoring of our comprehensive continuum of services for students with disabilities from birth to age 21 is essential in how we prepare students for their post-secondary career, college, and community opportunities. And that is not always easy. They do that through working with others to create partnerships with our community members to figure out how we can bring that learning into real life experiences for our students, and constantly thinking about ways to develop the staff to be able to meet the students' needs. So with that said, I just wanted to come on quickly with you this evening and engage in some discussion, but to first begin by sharing with you the 3 priorities that we are focused on in addressing our students. One is mitigating learning disruption. The second is addressing special education staff vacancies. And then the third is the importance of keeping our schools open and particularly thinking about the needs of our students who receive special education services and have disabilities. I also, at the end of our discussion, want to make sure I circle back to 3 key commitments that I want to talk about the importance of and why those are going to be our commitments. So let's start, and we'll begin by sharing, or I'll begin by sharing the focus on mitigating learning disruption. So this is absolutely one of our strategic priorities that we've talked about for all of our students in Montgomery County. We know that the pandemic has negatively impacted student performance, especially for many of our students with disabilities. This has to be a priority that we are very strategic about addressing. In the system, we constantly recognize the significant impacts of the events over the past year with students who have disabilities and ensuring that there is access to opportunities to address that learning disruption, and addressing it specifically in the areas of literacy and mathematics has been a huge part of our discussion. Now, as a part of our mitigating learning disruption plan, we are committed to providing academic achievement or improving the academic achievement of our students with disabilities by making sure we focus on a few key things: providing that professional development and learning for our staff, as well as the job embedded coaching opportunities, not only for our staff, but for our teachers, but for also all of those who support the students. That includes the paraeducators, teacher leaders who continue to work with our teams, and also our administrators. I think it's really important that everybody who has a responsibility for creating the conditions for our students to be able to learn and thrive in our schools have to be available to training that is going to help them do their jobs better, and especially given all the lessons that we've learned from COVID-19 to improve our practice. So that is a big part of our mitigating learning disruption plan, to invest in that professional job embedded coaching and professional development for the staff. The Office of Special Education also is collaborating with central office partners and school-based leadership to support the development and implementation of the school improvement plans. And that is also including the analysis of special education student data in our evidence of learning framework. We have used that evidence of learning framework for the last couple of years in MCPS. Our goal now is to be able to have our schools zone in specifically on student populations who we know have been truly impacted by the pandemic. And not just acknowledge that they've been impacted, but to say, what specifically will this student group need in order to continue to get them back on the road of making progress in a way that occurred before the pandemic, or maybe in ways that can better set us up for their success that didn't exist before the pandemic. So that school improvement plan is going to be key in our conversations with schools, and the accountability that is to be put in place for how we're going to address specifically our students receiving special education services through monitoring that data, and most importantly, responding to our students' learning and progressing in their learning. So that's the first thing. Mitigating learning disruption has to be a key part of what our focus is as a result of the pandemic. The second one is addressing special education staff vacancies. Now, yes, we know there is a national labor shortage across the country, and MCPS is not negated from that issue. But we have taken several steps to address the needs of schools with special education staff member vacancies, with the goal of minimizing the impact of the vacancies on the students and the staff. So as a result of that, staff from the Office of Special Education have provided support in 3 primary areas. First, the central office staff member coverage in classrooms, lunch, and recess. We have deployed many of our central office staff to our school buildings to make sure that we have enough staff coverage to provide services for our students in the school buildings. If it were not for our schools and our students within our schools, we would not even have a central office. So we're glad to be able to provide that layer of support for schools. Secondly, we are also focused on providing assistance with the completion of educational assessments. So really thinking about what are the assessment needs and how do we provide support to make sure those assessments are being done in a timely manner so that the school and the parents can get the information that they need to better address the needs of our students in our IEPs and other formalities in which we really need to define what the support needs to be for students to be successful. And then the third area is access to academic interventions outside of the school day. So we know that the school day is very important and we're focusing on what we're doing with within the hours of the school day that the students are with us. But we also realize that we want to make up for some lost time too, in which our students were not in their regular day-to-day interactions during the pandemic. So really looking at what all those interventions are that we're providing. In some schools, they're providing it before school and some after school so that we can, again, just put more time in with those students who benefit from that. We're also working with our Office of Human Resources and Development on continuing to recruit outstanding candidates for vacant positions, as well as for our substitute teacher pool, as there have been ongoing collaboration with the Office of Special Education in this process. So really having a strategic plan around how we are recruiting staff and letting them know how supportive our school system is. So not only when we hire them that they're being hired to fill a vacancy, but we're also sharing with them, when you come in as a part of the MCPS family and you're serving our children, these are the things that we're going to do to invest in your continued success. I know earlier I mentioned the professional development piece, but that's a big part of what people depend on, saying I may come and take a job, but once I take that job, what are the things that you're going to do to make sure that I continue to be successful in that job? So that continues to be a focus for us and working through our Office of Human Resources to do that. And then finally, the third priority that I mentioned earlier was keeping schools open. I don't know if any of you had an opportunity to see the press conference I held earlier today, and I had Dr. Bridges from the Department of Health and Human Services join me, but we made a joint statement in our commitment to keeping schools open. Yes, on Friday, when one of our neighboring school systems closed, I mean, yes, there were many surprises, and I got many emails saying we want to keep our schools open, and I was like, absolutely. That's exactly what we're doing. We're keeping our schools open. We have said, we've seen from our data, and our kids have shown us, taught us, and expressed us in every way possible that we are better able to provide a very strong foundation of an educational program when they are with us in person, and that's what we are committed to. Now, with that said, we know there have been an increase in COVID-19 cases throughout our school system, which is in alignment with what's happening across the United States and the world. Turn the news on any morning, any night, and you'll see that this is something that's happening nationally. In MCPS, we have had more cases spike up recently, but we are monitoring that specifically to make sure we're knowing where the spiking cases are. And most importantly, what we did today in the press conference was clarify exactly what we're doing to keep our schools safe so that we can remain our commitment to having that in-person learning. So our student case rate is still one of the lowest in the entire state of Maryland, and we want to keep it that way. I think sometimes when everybody sees what's happening around us, they may want to put all of us in one category, but we've done a great job in Montgomery County in having our students and our staff vaccinated. We've had our 5 to 11-year-olds, and you know we just got the vaccine for them last month, but over 41,000 of them have already been vaccinated in our school system. And you also know we have over 95% of our staff members who are vaccinated. So it's that data and those measures that we continue to lean on when we see numbers that says that, you know, we still have a low transmission rate when compared to other places. So our commitment to keeping the school system open 5 days per week has not changed. And I wanted you to make sure you heard that from me directly. One of the ways that we can help keep our schools safe for students and staff is through COVID-19 screening testing. I mentioned this on the press conference earlier, but any opportunity I have to emphasize this, I'm going to. We are increasing the amount of screening testing that we're going to have available in schools starting in January, and that is anticipating the spike So we are working and bringing on a few other testing companies to help us manage the need for that. But that means we're also going to need our families to consent for this testing. And we need all members of our community to help us with that. So as a result, I would first ask you to provide your consent form. If you have not already done so, go to our website. There's a scrolling bar there that you can click on and complete it. And then I would encourage you to ask everyone that you know who has a school-aged child in Montgomery County, have they provided consent? This is a community effort. It's almost like COVID-19 gives us the perfect example of how we're unable to accomplish anything alone. If I have a consent form for my child and your family who lives next door to me and you don't, that means, yes, my child can be tested in school, but your child may not be tested in school. It could very well be asymptomatic. So we may not know if they're carrying the virus or not if they're asymptomatic. So really emphasizing that to our community is a priority for me, especially as we get ready to go on winter break and have everybody come back in January. We want to set ourselves up for success. So I've also asked our community, if you are traveling during the winter break, please make sure that you test your students before they come back to school so that we can have a level playing field. And most importantly, making sure that as we come back together, we're sharing the responsibility of making sure we're creating safe spaces within our schools. So if you haven't done it yet, go to the website. The form to consent is available at the top of our website. It's on the left side of the boxes entitled COVID-19 information. You can also get a paper copy of the form at your child's school if you are someone who prefers handling paper and pencil. And today I challenge our businesses to make sure they were putting our QR codes, which could be scanned on their doors, on their counters, wherever their places of business are, so that the community can easily scan and make sure we're taking care of our children and our staff by creating safe spaces and getting those consent forms in. So those are our 3 priorities that I wanted to share with you because they all very much relate to us making sure we're keeping the forefront of the needs of our students with receiving special education services and disabilities at the forefront of how we are preparing to keep our schools safe and preparing for them to have positive experiences when they're in schools. So with that, I just want to end with 3 key commitments that I think are really important to share and that hopefully I can leave you with and we can have conversations in the future about. But I am, the commitments that I want to finalize is that I am identifying 3 key commitments connected specifically for our students with disabilities. First, we are committed to promoting improved academic achievement for all students with disabilities in the least restrictive environment, while meeting the state target for the provision of services in the general education setting for 80% of the time or greater. So that's really important to us, and I wanted you to hear that. The Maryland State Department of Education target for the provision of services in general education setting is 70.9%, and MCPS is currently at 67.3%. But I wanted you to hear that goal that we are setting for 80% of the time or greater. Secondly, we are committed to eliminating the disproportionate suspension of students with disabilities who are Black and African American. We are providing job-embedded professional development and de-escalation and implementing self-regulation strategies such as zones of regulations. These strategies are designed to proactively improve behaviors related to self-regulation. And I'm going to tell you, I have witnessed this myself. The zones of regulation, I was in a school visiting week before last, and it was an elementary school. And I walked around to kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade classrooms. And I saw these posters of zones of regulation available for students. And I love this model because it really does give the students, particularly our younger students, the language that they need to really express how they're feeling. And the zones, whether they're in the blue zone, the red zone, whatever it may be, it's also encouraging them to communicate how they're feeling so that we as the adults with them can make sure we're addressing exactly how they're feeling, what their needs are in real time, and engaging and modeling with them how to engage in those discussions. So I say that as a program that we're using in the system, but I've had a chance to see how schools are using it, and most importantly, how it's working for students. And I just want to thank our Office of Special Education Services, because it really is programs like that that I think do make a difference for our students and allow us to be able to go operationalize these priorities that we say are important. And it is important that we continue to look at how we have to address disproportionate suspension of students as well as making sure we're providing the emotional and social support for them. So third, the final commitment I wanted to share is that we're committed to continued improvement in graduation rates for students with disabilities. The 4-year graduation rate in MCPS is on the rise. There has been a 4.1% increase over 2 years for students receiving special education services, but we still have significant work to do. It's good to see those increases, but it's also important to continue to raise the bar for where we want to go and where we need to be. Our most recent rate is 69%, and we are consistently working with school staff to ensure that students are learning effectively in order to improve this rate. So this will be one of our markers that we continue to monitor and engage in discussion with you about to make sure that we're meeting our own expectation of serving our students with disabilities. I know that I have a limited time this evening. As you can see, I've enjoyed sharing how some of these priorities and commitments will play out in the best interest of our students. But I do want to say I appreciate you and thank you again for the opportunity to be here. And most importantly, I'm grateful for your role on this committee and your partnership with MCPS. And I know that we have a lot more work to do together, and I'm committed to us partnering to figuring out what we need to do to serve every single one of our students who we are responsible for serving within the school system. We owe that to our students, and we owe it to our families. So with that, I hope you all have a wonderful break, but I will pause here and see if there are any questions, if we want to engage in some additional discussion.
Well, Dr. McKnight, first of all, let me thank you so very much for the comments that you have made here tonight. It really speaks to your commitment to special education in such a tremendous way. And I love the way Phil connected your journey to his experiences with you many years ago at Tilden Middle School. I want to thank you also for the commitment that you have made to us as a district, as a school system, which also further makes it clear what the charge is for the Department of Special Education Services and the Office of Special Education. And so I want to say that there are some questions tonight that our parent community does have. And I want to especially thank the SEAC parent chairpersons, 2 of them who are here tonight, who have generated some excellent questions. And I'm going to start by asking you one of them. And you mentioned this during your comments, but one of the questions is, parental involvement, ways parents can continue to be involved with teachers in classrooms during the pandemic. That seems to be an area that the SEAC parent community wants to know. And so you've shared some things tonight, but can you further expound upon parental involvement during this pandemic period?
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Mason, for raising that question. I see parental involvement as a strength in Montgomery County Public Schools. I do. I think that we have a lot of informed parents who live in our community. They have experiences that they've had with the school systems, good, bad, or indifferent, but they always share. And every time our parents share whether it's been a success story or a story of something that we can improve upon, they share it within our network and within our school system. And so we then have more knowledge than we did before because our parents are very active and can share that information. And then it also then holds accountability for us to say, what do we do about it? How do we continue to keep success going? And how do we continue to improve in areas in which we need to do it? And I just have to say, as a parent, I have a 9-year-old son myself, and I know my husband and I constantly think about what his needs are and how he's feeling on most days. And we want all of the adults that come into contact with him have a really good understanding of that. And the best thing that we can do is inform all of the adults that work on his behalf and with him, who he is as an individual and what his needs are, and how that may be different or may be alike for the peers that he's in class with. So I think it's really important to ensure the academic and social needs are met by the student when we can make sure that there is that relationship and that conversation that constantly happens between the teachers and the staff and the parents to make sure that we are aware of who the student is that we're serving, what the needs are, and most importantly, recognizing how we partner and making sure that we meet those needs. We also have to recognize that due to the restrictions of being physically present in the classrooms and in schools, ensure the safety of the environment for everyone, which was the tradition in many ways that our families were used to. And in a lot of ways that was disrupted during the pandemic. I say it's even more important now for those connections to be made now that we have reconnected in person and our students and parents and staff members are getting to know each other in new ways that they may not have known as well when we were virtual. So we should take advantage of those opportunities. And when we can meet in person and when we can connect, please do so. And I know that everybody says everyone's busy, and we're all busy, and we're all always going to be busy. But I think even in the busyness of it, that should not stop us from making sure we're reaching out and extended that olive branch to making sure we're having the conversations so that we can personalize the learning and personalize the interactions that we need and desire for our students to occur in our schools. And that has to happen between the teacher, the parent, and the student. And the pandemic has taught us in many ways that we can better do this than we did before the pandemic.
Thank you, Dr. McKnight, for that response. There's another question that was raised by our SEAC co-chairpersons, and I must admit that, during your opening remarks, you really began to talk about this. One of their questions was, what are some updates or plans that you have to enhance equity and inclusion for students with disabilities? And I noted, of course, that during your comments, you really spoke specifically to the data point that you expect MCPS to achieve, because you know that that is a state and most importantly, a federal target. You may want to shed just a little bit more light on that, but I know that you did speak to it rather extensively during your opening comments.
Yes, I did. And I'll just reemphasize, the MCPS strategic plan is designed to address equity and inclusion with a major focus on mitigating learning disruption. We spent a lot of time in our board meetings just going through and talking about the importance of the system's strategic plan, because we wanted our community and wanted you and all of our parents to be able to see the connection between how that strategic plan combined with looking at the evidence of learning would ensure that we were really delineating our commitment to ensuring equity and access for our students. Improving the performance of students with disabilities is something that must be achieved, and it's just not optional. It's something that we all have to be accountable for. It's something that we all have to watch and monitor, and making sure that we are differentiating and personalizing learning for all of our student groups. Now, I know the Office of Special Education and the Office of Curriculum and Instruction collaborate on a lot of these programs. So I'll invite Dr. Mason and Dr. Lynch, if there are some specific strategies that are being implemented with our students to respond to that question, please make sure you add in. But I think the strategic plan and the monitoring of evidence of learning and making sure we're coming back to share that data, as well as the graduation rate with our community to really monitor our progress and hold ourselves accountable for that is really important, because this is about equity for our students.
Thank you, Dr. McKnight. Since I've returned, Phil Lynch and I have engaged in a lot of conversations around addressing the LRE data for MCPS, and we've had some discussions even with some of our parent groups. Most recently, we talked to members of the MCC PTA Special Needs chairs about this particular area. But Mr. Lynch, for just a second or so, if you can just share some of the work that your office does in collaboration with curriculum and instruction to improve our outcomes.
Certainly. So we work closely with our schools around their school improvement planning process. We support the schools with their goals that are associated with the academic outcomes of students with disabilities by helping them look at data. We provide them data specifically around their students with disabilities. And then from there, it's really about helping them to understand the tiered systems of support that we can provide to students with disabilities who may not have been able to meet with access or progress to those curriculum goals through that initial tier one or that initial learning opportunity. They need it to be taught to them in a different way, in a way that may include a multisensory approach. And so we've done a lot of training with our staff around these interventions that we typically refer to as tier 3 interventions, which are then delivered to schools, to students in our schools who meet those criteria around the data that shows that it is a good fit for them. So we've spent a lot of time and resources training staff around these different interventions. so that they can meet the needs of those students with disabilities. And then it's about really making sure that our staff have the support that they need to be able to deliver those interventions appropriately, being there when they need support with that implementation process. So looking at the data and then really helping them with the tools, and then being there when they need support for the delivery. That's really the approach that we've taken from our office and continue to take. And then partnering with our other offices, such as the Office of School Support and Improvement, to really be active members in that school improvement planning process to really get at those goals that are specific to students with disabilities. So I think that's one of the primary approaches we've taken.
Thank you so much for adding to that particular response that was given so beautifully by Dr. McKnight. Phil, I'm going to ask you to go to another quick data point about MCPS, because as Dr. McKnight talked about the fact that we must achieve our 80% LRE rate. That means children being served in a general education environment at least 80% of the school day, and 80% of our students having to be in that particular setting. I want you to talk a little bit about the statistical data point in reference to the percent of students who are on alternate learning outcomes, and also what percentage of our students are in self-contained classes.
Certainly. So we have slightly over 1% of our students with disabilities who are working towards those alternate learning outcomes. Those are students who've met that criteria to work towards those alternate outcomes. That would be slightly over 1% of that student body. And then we have for students that are in the majority of their time in the self-contained settings, we are roughly 14%, slightly over 14%, 14.04 to be exact, percent of our students who are receiving services in that environment. That would be over the state target, and so we're always working to bring that number down. That's one number we want to try to decrease, which would mean that inversely we're increasing those students who are served in that general education setting. The state target for that setting is 10%, and again we're roughly 14% for those students.
As you can see, so as you can see, that's an area that MCPS must continue to address, which aligns itself with what Dr. McKnight has also stated is a commitment to improve our LRE data. Dr. McKnight, I'm going to just shift to another question. I know and I understand that there are a few questions that have come forth in the chat. And so, Mr. Lynch, I'm going to ask you to take a look at some of those questions as well, because they may be services or data related questions that perhaps we can also try to address. But Dr. McKnight, I was going to ask you one of the questions that our SEAC chairpersons generated, and that was, we wanted to know more about the implementation of the multi-tiered systems of supports in MCPS. Could you speak about that, please?
Absolutely. Thank you. So the multi-tiered system of support in schools involves the collaboration of a number of offices. Under the leadership of Rochelle Rubin, who is the chief of the Office of Teaching and Learning in Schools, it includes 4 offices. It is the Office of Special Education, the Office of Curriculum and Instructional Programs, the Student and Family Support, School and Support and Improvement Office, and SSI, School Support Improvement. So all of these offices essentially develop a comprehensive plan for the staff to provide a collaborative and coordinated approach to provide direct support to schools, so that the support that they're providing to the schools is actually to address the diverse academic and social emotional needs of all of the students. And so we felt that it was important to bring all of those offices together, because they all have a key component of what they have to provide in terms of services to make sure we're meeting the needs of our students. When we return to school for in-person learning, we knew that the learning and the social emotional needs based on the current formal and informal assessments were going to be something that we need to focus on, and we needed to have a better understanding of exactly what that was going to be for mathematics and literacy. So with that overview of the rationale for the composition of the multi-tiered system of support across offices, I strongly recommend that Ms. Rubin and the associate superintendents from each of the offices that I mentioned being invited back to SEAC to really talk about what we're continuing to learn as we look at this cross-office approach to really say, how are we going to continue to collaborate and address the needs within the Office of Special Education and all of the other offices, curriculum and instruction, SSI, to provide evidence-based reading and mathematics instruction and interventions to our students. We continue to monitor this through our Performance Matters platform, but I would suggest that a representative from the Office of Shared Accountability also come, because I think it's important for this group to truly understand how the collaboration efforts of those offices combined really does meet to us managing and looking at what we are learning about our students and how they are progressing specifically in those areas.
Thank you so much again, Dr. McKnight, for that response. I can honestly say for myself over the years in leadership that without that cross-functional approach and working with multiple offices, you cannot improve the outcomes of students with disabilities or provide the multi-tiered level of support that's needed in order for our students in particular, to truly benefit. Mr. Lynch, I wanted you to ask if there are any questions in the chat. I just wanted to make sure that if there's something that needs clarification, I want you just to take a moment to look at that and let me know.
Yes, I was looking at that now, Dr. Mason. I was going to type a few responses in there. I could say a few out loud. For example, there's one suggestion that we provide professional development to our staff around the specific or unique nature of different types of disabilities. I'm summarizing that question, but I think that that's a great suggestion. And, oftentimes with our teachers, we're focused on, when we do have an opportunity to see them, we're focused on those data points that we mentioned, we're focused on those interventions. But, we do want to make sure that that our staff understand the unique aspects of different types of disabilities and those traits that come along with those style of learners. So I think that's a great suggestion. And we have an opportunity to do that when we meet with our teacher leaders and our teachers on a regular basis.
Thank you so much for responding to that particular question in the chat. And if there are other questions, please feel free, Mr. Lynch, to generate a response so that we can definitely follow up on the important points that our parents are trying to make. We know that we have Dr. McKnight for a few more minutes, but I do want to ask two questions on behalf of the SEAC co-chairs and the parents that they represent. Dr. McKnight, I've been in special ed a long time, as you know, and sometimes parents do talk about the fact that there seems to be a disparity between services in one area of the county versus another. And one of the questions that was generated this evening for this evening's discussion was a common complaint among parents of students with special education needs is the disparity among service delivery and programs across MCPS. What is the plan to improve this? And I know that you have expectations of us. You've shared them tonight. I want you to feel free to reiterate those expectations, and Mr. Lynch and I can certainly provide a little insight into our thoughts around it as well.
Thank you so much for saying that. I'll start by saying, as the interim superintendent, it is my absolute expectation that the Office of Special Education would work to ensure that all special education services provided to students throughout Montgomery County are absolutely provided in a way so that they are meeting the needs of our students and ensuring that we are distributing the resources in a way that is being meaningful to every single student within the system. We have many resources, people resources, as well as other types of resources to make sure the service we are providing to students is a meaningful one. So I believe that in no circumstances should we be lacking to provide a student with what they need. So services and programs that need support regarding the implementation, it could be of curriculum, behavioral strategies, whatever it is, must receive access to high quality professional learning. I kind of going back to that whole emphasis on, if we are not meeting a student's needs, then what is it that those who are implementing that program or that resource not understanding, and how can we help support them so that they can make sure that the resources are getting to the student, because that's the purpose of having the resources that we have available. I also think it's really important for collaborations with other offices. And I just said that in my last response to the question that you asked, but collaboration across offices along with the Office of Special Education is needed and must be a component to addressing any disparities that may exist among any programs or services for students with disabilities.
Thank you so much, Dr. McKnight. I will be honest and I will say this, that throughout my years, there have always been some areas where there's some discrepancy. School systems are large, and I was taught years ago that programs are people. And so sometimes you'll find differences because you know that certain teachers may have a need in a certain area for them to improve their practice. And so it's our responsibility at central office when we see that there's a school or a program or a service that needs more professional learning opportunities, that they need the resources that Dr. McKnight addressed, that we need to support those schools to improve their capacity to provide that consistent high level of instruction. That's the responsibility of central office, is to support schools. And so we, Phil and I, along with others in special education, as a parent, if you're listening, if there is a school where you feel that there's a concern with regard to the quality of instruction, I've always been open, Mr. Lynch has always been open to hearing directly from you. We would like to take a look at that because principals always value our support, and they always value any additional resources that we can provide so they can assure quality instructional services for our students. Dr. McKnight, because it is getting late, I'm going to ask you one last question because it's almost 8 o'clock, and I wanted to honor your time commitment with us, which we value and appreciate so much. But this has been a pressing topic for our special education parent community, and you spoke about the implications of COVID-19 so beautifully in your opening remarks. But we know that we have medically fragile children. And many of the parents, some of them who are listening tonight, have spoken to me and spoken to Mr. Lynch directly about what else can MCPS do to ensure that schools are safe, because when children are medically fragile, those students really have more compromised immune systems, a greater level of being exposed to disease and things of that nature. So this has been a concern for our parent community. And I just wanted you to take this opportunity to see, your thoughts about it and how you think we should move forward.
Thank you for that question. This question reminded me of all of the conversations we were involved in when we were closed last year, and then we opened in the spring, and we were having the discussion about who is it that is being most impacted during this time that we are not in school in person, and how do we make sure we're bringing them in as a priority or making sure we're providing the services for them. And of course, it was our students receiving special education services in so many different ways that we immediately went to and recognized that we needed to support our families, we need to support our students, and have centers and things open up so that we could address it, and all while the pandemic was still happening. So I'll say since the beginning of the pandemic, the staff in MCPS have remained in constant communication with the Department of Health and Human Services. Yes, we came into this pandemic as educators. I think we're coming, whenever we get out of this pandemic, we all will have much more information around public health and all of these things that we never knew we would learn so much about. But we continue as a school system to know that we want to work with our expert partners, and the Department of Health and Human Services have presented this area of expertise that have guided us throughout the pandemic about how do we make sure we provide safe and healthy environments for our students, knowing that we need to be able to provide services for them, and those services are best done when we are able to be in physical contact with them. And I'll say that our medically fragile students, physical safety has always been a priority and always on the forefront of our mind. And if there are specific needs in which we need to consult with our DHHS to figure out ways to work that out, we are available to do that and meet with them and have done that. And so I will say, without knowing the specifics of this question, I'm sure there could be many examples that families may have experienced that they just want to understand better. I say, please reach out to our Office of Special Education in collaboration with designated members of the DHHS, which can meet with you as parents. And we are committed to doing that. I mean, we will get on a call or a Zoom meeting with parents and members from the Department of Health if you feel like there's something that you want to discuss related to the medical needs of your child, and how we can coordinate efforts to make sure that we develop a plan that can include their safe participation in school, because that's what we all want. But most importantly, we want to know that you understand all of the things that are taken into consideration of coming up with that plan, and that you are a part of coming up with that plan for your child. So please do not hesitate to reach out and know that we can coordinate that so that everyone understands and know all of the parts of what we're putting together to make sure we're meeting the needs of our students. So I look forward to our families following up so that they can feel comfortable in knowing what we're doing in these situations.
Well, Dr. McKnight, I want to thank you again for coming to our SEAC meeting this evening. Thank you so much for the time that you've given, not only to speak holistically about your vision, your commitment to special education, and most importantly, for addressing so many of the critical questions that our parents have asked this evening. I would like to at least give our two co-chairpersons from SEAC the opportunity to say a few closing remarks to you as well in terms of their gratitude for your participation tonight. I want to start with you, Victoria.
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Mason, and thank you to Dr. McKnight to be here with us tonight and for answering all our questions. We really appreciate your support, and we really appreciate you taking the time to be with us tonight. Thank you, and we look forward to keeping working with you.
And Connie, if you'd like to say a few words to Dr. McKnight.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Mason. Good evening, Dr. Knight. It's so nice to see you. We wish that we can see you more than once a year.
You can, just let me know when. I'm happy to come back.
We have our biggest audience when you come in. Like I was looking, like we had like 93 families, so we we don't usually see that. But thank you again for making the time to talk to us and for giving us so many updates and for answering all our questions. We really appreciate it, and we wish you have a wonderful holiday season with your family. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciated being here tonight. And I really do mean that. I am happy to come back and engage in these discussions as much as I possibly can. I mean, once a year, I agree. I can come in more often. And if this is going to create more of an opportunity for more of our families to get on and engage in the discussion and talk about what we can do together to meet the needs of all of our students, I'm happy to do it. It's through the dialogue that we get to the best answers for our children. And when we all bring that commitment to the process, then we all win because we win for our kids. So I want to thank you all for that. As I said, I know you have a ton of things to do on your list. I've given up on mine, but don't follow my lead. But thank you. And I wish you all a safe and wonderful holiday as well. Please take care of yourselves and our children. And I look forward to us doing great things in the new year.
Thank you so very much, Dr. McKnight. Phil?
Have a good night.
Thank you so much, Dr. McKnight. Thank you for being here this evening, and thank you for going down that little road. I know how busy you've been. I've been waiting a long time to share, to remind you about that story, but I know it's in your heart. I know it's in mine. So again, that's an experience that that was real and I know will last. And the number of leaders that came out of that experience that I would see in the curriculum office later and everything, it was great. And it was under your leadership that we got it done. So thank you again. And thank you for being here this evening and for giving of your time to us in this community.
Thank you. My pleasure. Take care, everyone.
Bye.
So at this time, I might take a few questions. I'm going to try to just take a few questions that were in the chat, and then we'll turn it over to the co-chairs to go into the collaboration time. There was a question regarding the use of paraeducators to help cover other classes, and I'm just going to be open and honest with you on this, and I'll speak from experience. Dr. McKnight shared her commitment to keeping schools open, and that's taken a lot of work. And she also talked about the strategies that we're taking to support the staffing for education and special education in particular. But it has meant that we are working across all of our classrooms. Administrators are working in many different ways to use the staff that they have available to make sure that that the classrooms are appropriately staffed, and it has taken a lot of shifting of folks around. I know that my staff and myself can speak from experience. I was in 2 schools this morning or today, and I covered lunch at one of our schools today. And I'm not saying that as a bragging right. I'm saying that as just a point of fact that that we are all doing everything that we can do to help meet this commitment to keep our schools open. And so we ask for your patience, knowing that that might mean that staff that your students are typically working with on a daily basis may have to shift from one place to another in order to help cover, depending on what the quarantine needs are, or whatever the needs are for the day. But we know that we're hit every day with a different surprise, and we have to rise to the occasion in order to make sure that our students are safe and that we're keeping the schools open. There was a question earlier about training staff on specific disabilities. One thing I'd like to share, if you don't know it, you should become familiar with this fact that we partner well with different organizations to help meet this need around educating staff and also collaborating with the parent community. So those collaborations look like working with our Extraordinary Minds group, where we in pre-pandemic times had our evening conference sessions where we would meet with that community, and that would be one way where our staff would also enter into that place of collaboration with our staff and with parents to learn more about how to serve students on the autism spectrum. The Down Syndrome Network, that partnership, their Techniques for Success conference, which is fabulous, which they've kept rolling virtually through the pandemic, is another example. And then within our own offices internally, we offer ongoing professional learning around the different disabilities. The Autism Office offers general trainings, but also specific to schools, where we know that we have students who may need specific types of support, where they will go in and work with the staff in that school. So those are just a few examples of ways in which we train our staff, partnering with our community members, and also doing some targeted training at specific school sites. So those were a couple of answers that I wanted to call out as I was looking at the chat. Somebody asked about alternate learning outcomes. That is what the ALO stands for. And I know that there was a comment about our ongoing commitment to working with families around educating our staff on the different types of disabilities. So with that said, I want to turn it over to our co-chairs. So Connie is going to be the co-host for that session. Thank you all for being here. Again, our next meeting is on January 27th. That's Thursday the 27th. At the bottom of that agenda are our other sessions. There was a technical question about when you could access this recording. It usually takes us a couple of days to download it and get it up on the SEAC webpage. So I would give us a couple of days to get that posted on the webpage for those of you who are interested in viewing the recording of this session. Thank you all very much. Have a wonderful evening. And thank you again to staff, and a special thank you to Dr. Mason for leading those questions. All right. Good night, everybody.